everyone. I am Hugo Alvarado, and I'm here with Andres Rico. It's been a while. We've been busy, haven't been able to record much, but here we are. Big week for La Selecta. 3 important games coming up. The next one around the corner will be Panama. And here we are to talk about the game, talk about the convocatoria.
Have you been praying?
No, I have not been praying. I've been watching the video of the 2008 Taleada.
The Lomazo?
Yes. The Lomazo, the Luis Anaya
Milagro
Lomazo.
Under the Bencaso de Agua.
So feeling positive here. I've been seeing a lot of, maybe not negative vibes out there, but a lot of pessimistic thoughts about the game. Heard today only 6,000 tickets have been sold. I was really surprised about that.
For the Panama game, right? Yeah.
For the Panama game, but I'm feeling positive. I'm feeling pumped. I'm always positive, but I really feel like the guys can pull this off. We've beaten Panama at home. They've never been able to beat us, and I think we're going to continue with that. Not underestimating the rival at all, like some of the media out of Panama, but we'll see. We'll see on Thursday. What are your thoughts, Andres?
Yeah, it's been an interesting build up to the match. The downers along the way in the last couple of days with Zabaleta getting that injury and being, day to day, basically whether he's going to be able to join at some point during the match day window, along with, Ronald going down, knowing that he was playing with the fracture. Like, that's crazy. So he won't be able to play. Romulo, his backup, is down. Narciso was up and down whether he was going to play or not for testing positive for COVID. Fortunately, he's tested negative. And I think that was yesterday or 2 days ago. So he's back in training. Training today was rained out. So there's all these factors that are within the team that Hugo Perez and his coaching staff are going to deal with. But then on the outside, yeah, I've noticed, like you said, people been kind of pessimistic or talking down on the team. Ironically, they're sounding more like the Panamanian press and Salvadoran fans, I ain't going to lie. But I think, it makes sense with the central column being kind of in shambles due to various health reasons. There's room to be a little bit worried. But as you mentioned, I think there's enough pieces that Hugo Perez should be able to piece an 11 together and go for it. I think the most surprising thing is the call-ups for the mid. I think that might be able to help calm things down in terms of cohesiveness, getting those touches, breaking lines. That's where the La Selectas had the hardest time. And that's why they've gone, several minutes without scoring. And I know that's been something that's been under the magnifying glass, bajo la lupa, the last couple of weeks, with people being concerned with this lack of goals. Because I think the last one that the team scored was against Qatar in the Gold Cup. So it's been a little bit.
Yeah, I'm very pleased to see some new, not necessarily new, but Pablo Puñet. I think he's done enough to earn his call up again to the La Selecta, and I think he's going to bring a lot of experience to the midfield. He's a very strong player, someone who can really hold the ball. He's used to playing at a league that can also be very physical. I think he's going to bring a lot to the table. Cristian Martinez is receiving his first official call-up, and he's someone I've been following for a long time and really trust in his abilities to bring in a lot of strength in the holding mid position. I think he's someone who, if Narciso is not ready for this game, he's someone who can really step in to the plate and basically perform. That's my opinion.
So for those of us that haven't gotten to see him play or haven't followed him as much, how would you describe him as like a midfielder? Does he play more of a similar role that Thadwing has that's more, offensive minded? Or is he more defensive minded, like a five, like Narciso? Is he box to box, like the more modern version of that position? How could you describe him to everybody?
I think he's a hybrid, but I will say that definitely he's a hybrid between a 5 and an 8 is what I meant. But I think he's a little bit more defensive minded. Someone who can break a lot of the play, the opponents in the mid, distribute the ball from the back line to the offensive midfielders to the sides. He can really organize the game when necessary. He has decent size, definitely more than Narciso. So I think he can, against the Panamanian team that physically they're stronger than us in that sense. I think he's someone who can really help us. He plays in a league that, whether we like it or not, even though there are neighbors to the south, it's a much more competitive league. It's the league that exports the most players out of Central America, where they have fields that are in very good shape. Why do I mention that? I mentioned that because the speed of the game is faster, so he's used to playing in those fields. The Costa Rican league has a lot of players that are physically very similar to the Panamanians. So I think that he can bring a lot to the plate, and I'm looking forward to seeing him get some minutes
Yeah, I know you've
against
been
Panama.
trying to get him on the national team for a while now. I'd say over a year that he's been on your radar. So it must feel good to see, that he made his debut against Guatemala and DC, and hopefully we'll get to see him in this next window of matches. And then in the attack, I saw interviews and read stuff where Hugo Perez mentioned he was going to try and bring Bonilla back, and that they were hoping that COVID protocols in Thailand would be lightened. But unfortunately, it seems that isn't the case because he's not in the final list. What
Yeah.
do you think about the attack and the lack of goals? Because I know that's on everybody's mind, that there seems to be a dry spell. And for me, the main one that I take into account is those 3 matches in the last FIFA window. To me, friendly matches you can't really take too serious because either you don't have the full squad there. It's just looking for problems where they aren't. But within the last 3 qualifiers, what do you think needs to be corrected in order to, score?
Yeah, I mean, everybody talks about forwards and the lack of forwards, and Bonilla, unfortunately, he won't be able to make it. COVID restrictions are just too much in Thailand, and he will miss a lot of games if he comes, and his team doesn't want to let him go. I always like Bonilla. I've said it here many times. Even if I get criticized, I think he's one of our best forwards that we have. Very different number 9. I think that a lot of people think that a forward should be able to take the game on their own and make a huge difference, like Fito did in his best days. And that's not always the case. There are different styles of forwards. With that being said, I honestly don't think our problem relies in the lack of number 9. I think that in the last 3 games that we played last month, I just don't think the team was able to create in the midfield enough opportunities like the ones we were creating in the Gold Cup. And I think that that's where Hugo Perez is working on. And I think he's mentioned that as well. And he mentioned that back in the Gold Cup, even when we didn't score, he would, point out that the team created enough opportunities, and he was happy about that because the goals were going to eventually come, and they did. And I just don't think we've been able to do that in the first three matches. So I really don't think our problem relies on the lack of a number 9. I think Joaquin can do that job very well. I think Walamir can do that job as well. Christian Sorto will be another new face that we're going to see. He can play as a 9 or he can play on the left side. Young player. He convinced the coaching staff in the game against Guatemala. So I think we have enough pieces to be able to score if we create the opportunities. I think for me, it's more about whoever plays. When you think about it, we really have a talented midfield, and we haven't been able to get them to understand each other and play well. And perhaps, it could be the lack of international experience for some of these players. And now they already had, those 3 games, and I'm hopeful that, they will be able to manage spaces better. I think that teams really studied us from what we did in the Gold Cup. They came up and they pressure us really high, and we didn't have the spaces that we had in the Gold Cup when we were making that transition from the way that Carlos de los Cobos played and the way that Hugo Perez plays, which is very different. De los Cobos was a more slower game where the ball was kept in the back line for most of the game. Hugo Perez, has brought a style of play where there's a lot of movement in the midfield. We try to keep the ball and go up with the ball on our feet. And now in the qualifiers, team know that about us, and they have pressure us really high, and we haven't been able to create the spaces under those circumstances. And I'm hoping that we can manage to create more opportunities, and the goals are going to come naturally. So I don't think it's a lack of a number 9. I think it's a matter of creating opportunities for whoever is playing up there.
And as we mentioned here plenty of times already, we're going to bore you with this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The problem also is we're not as stacked up on top because of the way that the league works. You look at the top goal scorers in the domestic league in El Salvador, and they're all foreign players that are ineligible to play for El Salvador's national team. And then you look at who's playing in that position, and again, it's very limited. These spots usually go to foreign players that, I'm not going to lie, they can't make it in their own domestic leagues, and so it's a good option for them to continue with the careers and hopefully use this as a stepping stone. But the problem with that is you're basically developing other countries' strikers or adding to their player pool, right? And for years, SLO has been basically ignoring the development of its own players. So what you're seeing now is the fruit of it. They spend most of their money for strikers, and then there's nothing left for the other positions. So of course you're going to have more domestically developed players in the defense and in the mid, and especially in the mid, because it's in the Salvadoran DNA that, for the most part, we're a very technical based soccer country. Most of our players are very technical. And like you said, I think if the mid is settled down, if we don't give up those passes in the defensive third, if we don't make those mental relapses that have just been a little too common under the Hugo Perez era, with the transition from the mid forward, I think we'll be in good shape. I think we were also spoiled in the sense that we got to see the Cheo years, where he had people to play off of, but he was someone that when he needed to carry the team, he did so. And that's something that, the only other player that I could think of, and I didn't get to see him play, that could actually carry the team and make something happen was in Mexico, So I'm hoping that with these new pieces in the midfield, Hugo Perez is going to be able to relieve some pressure on the 5 and open things up moving forward, because I feel like whenever we'd get the ball like you said, teams have studied us. So you'd see the 5 and the 8 really close to each other, and boom, they get closed down really quick. And then the only option was touching it back, or, we'd end up losing it. So I hope they're able to manage traffic in the mid. I think Pablo Puñed being called up is going to be a very interesting dilemma for Hugo Perez to see in what places or situations he's going to choose to go with Pablo. And what do you get with Pablo? You have someone that tactically is very sound, like this guy's soccer IQ and his DNA and his vision on the field. He's going to be where he's supposed to be. And I think for now, fortunately for him, his age isn't necessarily a factor. I used to like him when he would play as a 5 with Roca. Like, he's, in my opinion, back then, he was like one of the best 5s that I'd seen for La Selecta. But now I think if you give him a little more freedom in the mid, he'll be able to either keep the tempo up or slow things down when need be, and take some of that relief off of the 5, and whether it's Narciso if he plays, or if it's Darwin or Christian if he plays, but just have someone there that they can release the ball to, and then start the buildup of the play of the sequence. Because that's, I think, where we have that problem is within like the second or third pass, we're not able to exploit on the wings or get rid of it. We can't find space. We just get swallowed up by the other team's mid. And then that's where you see some of the mistakes that have been occurring, whether it's Darwin or Enrico. And if some of those things can be tweaked, we're going to have a lot, better results than we did this first window.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also, let's positive thing for La Selecta is that we have a couple players who are going through a good moment with their teams. Armando Moreno being one of them, and Enrico being another one. Pablo, he just won a championship. So
congrats,
so
man.
we have a talented midfield, and yes, some of them are young. But I think that it will be important to take advantage of the good moments, and hopefully they can bring that into the national team as well.
Yeah, and I think that also is an important factor that we didn't see over the summer. It's not the same when you're in a certain rhythm of playing than when, all of a sudden you're playing 2 games a week or even more. We'll see how that affects the midfield. I'm optimistic in the sense that they're still being able to complete different objectives. I think calling Puñed shows that Hugo Perez is actually, following up with what he says, that it's not that necessarily people are getting shut out of the national team and he's not going to take a look at them. The same thing with Martinez. I think, based off of how the midfield responded the last couple of games, there were some questions there, and I think he's in a way trying to answer them or find answers to them while not undermining the vision towards 2026. But I think bringing in a veteran such as Pablo can help bring some type of order so that the rest of the players that need to develop for 2026 can, while getting results, because it's going to be hard to try and develop players or justify developing players when you're not getting the right results. I was listening to an interview that he did recently, and he says that he doesn't want to be the solution or doesn't see himself as a solution. And no, I think, that's a super humble thing to say. I don't see him as the main solution for La Selecta, but considering his record, considering the performances that he's given at his club level, as he's had with La Selecta, I think it's a good opportunity to try out something different, to keep the other teams that studied the Gold Cup on their toes.
I think the area where, there's a lot of question marks, answers are a few, but our defense, our center defenders, we don't have our 2 center defenders. Our 2 starting
starters,
our 2 starters. We don't have Zabaleta, we don't have Rodriguez, I think those are hard to find substitutes for them, but I think it's a great opportunity for the guys who are available to step it up, to show that they have what it takes to play. It's a great opportunity for guys like Vigil. I think Vigil has been getting some minutes in the friendly matches. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays. Our three center back options will be Vigil, Dominguez, and Lisandro, who can also play that position. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see how we manage, and hopefully Zabaleta can be ready for game 2 and 3. But for now, for Panama, we know we won't have him, and it's a big loss for us. But at the same time, we knew going into this qualifier that for one reason or another, these things are going to come up because of the number of games that are being played in a very short period of time. So now we're seeing it. We don't have Zabaleta, we don't have Rodriguez. Orellana is questionable in terms of how he's doing after recovering from COVID. Tamacas was a question mark a few days ago. So yeah, I mean that's why it's important to have a big pool of players, and in the midfield I think we're fine. That's why we have even more additions this time, and there's some other guys that weren't called that can also play in those positions. I mean, Granito was just called for a microciclo.
Yeah, that was good to see. I was happy for him, definitely, that he was able to show up for camp, and then that at least he's being taken into consideration too, because I think he's another possible piece either in the short term or medium term that could be a piece for the midfield.
Right. And Hugo has shown, I mean, I don't have the numbers, but if you look at the number of players that play under Carlos de los Cobos and the number of players that have played under Hugo Perez thus far, I don't know, I'm thinking the number is at least double the amount of players. So when I hear,
not just in the microciclos, like in the friendly matches too.
Right. So when I hear, he's calling the same players, or he's calling his friends, or I've seen that. I mean, I'm like, seriously? Have you looked at the number of players that have made their debut under Hugo Perez?
That's a debut. That's another thing to take in consideration, that not only has he brought familiar faces or the base, like Darwin's generation, he's relied on a few of them, but he's debuted so many players up to this point that can't you guys see, or for the naysayers, right? Can't you see that he's starting to look beyond just this cycle, this qualification cycle? Like it's impressive, and it has to be done. He's not going to find the right pieces right away, but you're starting to see some of those diamonds in the rough that are appearing, and the younger you find them, the better. Because let's say like with Heido's made a big turnaround in his international career, but he's already 28, so he's not a long-term option. And hopefully he can take advantage of some of the inertia and the hype that has been around his name, especially in the Gold Cup, to make a move elsewhere. But if he doesn't, I mean, we'll just have to rely on him responding at an international level for his development. But yeah, he's not a long-term piece. So you got to start looking who's next in line and who's after that. And I think that's the main thing that you have to see when you look at the number of players debuting, or let's say the match versus Guatemala, that they said they'd only take their U23s. Look at the guys that debuted there that now can be options for U23s, U20s. Like, keeping it in-house and seeing them play at an international level is better than just the microciclos, even though I think they're pretty productive in a sense of getting to know some of these players and then make the jump, just like Echalate did, where he showed up first to the microciclo and then proved himself, and boom, you saw him, battling Larin for the starting left back. You want to see that. You need to have that competition, and on top of that, bring in all the personnel that you can. Because yes, it's a tiny country. Our player pool is relatively small to other countries, but if you're afraid to try people out, you're just gonna. What are you gonna have 40-year-old players playing because you're scared of bringing in the 18-year-old, 19-year-old youngster? Like, that's just how it is. Like, another thing, I know it's kind of a non sequitur, but like I was watching El Gráfico TV, and they're mentioning how much Jose Luis Pinto wants to coach Guatemala. And according to them, they said that they had seen reports that he wanted 40,000 a month. And then the Panamanian journalist that they were talking to mentioned that Christensen in Panama makes he estimated around 35,000. I don't think it's that close to what Hugo Perez is playing. I know that Los Cobos was making a decent amount with help from outside sources of the federation because of the lack of sponsorship. But again, we're not going to be this big draw to big name coaches or established coaches. They're going to have to always hire people because of their potential, right? Or even if their track record or their CV is pretty short, just looking at the potential that they have. And I think in that sense, they've taken a risk with Hugo Perez and co. And not only are they saving money financially by doing that, but it's giving its fruits. I'm not saying that Lefes Food should not be paying, because this guy over here should be getting paid getting compensated what he's owed, and the coaching staff as well. But I think the Salvadoran fan just needs to take into account that you need to be able to take risks with people, whether it's, you don't let inexperience be that barrier of letting someone have a shot and starting their career. Because I think that's where we need to change the mentality, is you're not going to just have a starting 11 that can play European teams, South American teams, and compete like that. It's a long process. You need to start with the youngsters. You need to find the right type of coaching staff that has a different idea. And I think we're seeing that. And I hope, the results don't necessarily hamper that. I know it hampers or bogs down with the fans, and they get all down and pessimistic and start talking a lot of shit, which is, if that's what you do, it's all good. But I think the main thing is, if you follow this team, you've seen the steps or how it's been managed in the past, and it's been fucking horrible. And I think things are a little bit different now, in the sense that you're bringing more people in, people from outside, different ideas. And as long as you plant this seed and let it go long term, I think you can talk shit in 8 years if we still suck, 12 years and we still suck. So I think our generation and the younger people need to understand that this is something that's going to take a while, and previous generations just didn't have the tools, or didn't want to bring the tools, or didn't want to bring the resources to make sure that something long term was secured, because it's already been 40 years almost. Yeah, 40 years since we qualified to the last World Cup. And since then, it's just been short-term goals that don't lead anywhere. And now you have a whole generation of Salvadorans that don't know what it's like to see their team play in a World Cup. And it's for a reason. So just something to keep in mind, like, can Lefes afford Jose Luis Pinto? I don't think so. But what are you seeing? You're seeing that along with the positive results, there's more sponsors, which means a bigger budget. And hopefully that turns into compensating people, compensating the right people, and turning this thing around. So with the next 3 matches, with all the limitations, despite things, looking upward, I don't know. I don't want to predict anything, but I think against Panama, it'll be, if they pressure our defense enough, we'll have a hard time. But if our midfield steps up and makes the connections and keeps Panama on their toes, I think we'll be okay. But we need the ball. Against a team like Panama, we need the ball. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. The game with Costa Rica, I'm optimistic even with the limitations, because I just heard they're going to play without any fans at the stadium in San Jose. So I think that could be beneficial to us up to a point. And then, of course, the match with Mexico seems to be almost sold out. So, hopefully that'll have an influence on the Mexican players. Maybe we'll have one of our center backs back, and Eric, because I think the duo between Eric and Dominguez could be pretty promising as well. So how are you feeling about these matches coming up?
Well, I would love to speak more to the subject that you were talking about.
I'm
going to try to. I'm going to try to.
I talked about a whole bunch of shit.
I'm going to try to give the small version of it, but I mean, I'm not here to change anybody's mind. And in this show, it's about just expressing what we feel as fans. I am here as a fan, sharing my opinions. But I wish, and I know that this is not the case with everyone, especially the people who listen to us and also the people who live in the United States. But I hope that someday our fans are able to see that the fans contribute to the same problem that we have been criticizing for decades. For example, we say that the youngsters never get a chance to play. The domestic teams should give the youngsters an opportunity. They should play the youngsters. They never play the youngsters. They only hire foreign strikers, et cetera. And then when Hugo Perez takes the opportunity of a friendly match outside of a FIFA window to call all of those youngsters who are the future for 2026, who need the mileage for their under 20 World Cup qualifiers and Olympic qualifiers, then I hear people saying they shouldn't be called to those games. They should be called to a camp. They should be filtered through a camp. It's contradicting. And one thing, and I heard this from media actually, if they listen to us, great, you know who I'm talking about. Professional players, all of the guys that Hugo Perez called against Panama, with the exception of Alguera, they're all professional players with professional contracts. You cannot call professional players to a scouting camp like the one I organized in 2012. You just can't. There's no professional team who's going to allow their players to go into an unofficial camp to risk of getting injured outside of a FIFA window. It doesn't happen. The only possibility that Hugo Perez has to call these guys and look at them is during the friendly matches that clubs are not even obligated to loan their players to the outside of FIFA window games. So that's one thing I wanted to mention, where if we forget about the senior team for a minute, I know it's hard to forget. We're all excited about it. I'm excited about it. But if we just put that aside for a minute and we think back to our U20s and how much our U20s struggle I know that was the exception of the 2013, but that's an exception. But if we see how our U20s, our U23s struggle, because usually those teams are put together from players from the second division, third division, reserves. If we already talk about how limited our first division is, just imagine how the second and third divisions are. We've always seen how limited they are because they have because of the lack of exposure to international soccer, international football. That has always happened to us historically. And now we have a coach who's bringing those players into the senior team to play against another senior team, because Guatemala had a combination of U23s and seniors. Come on, guys. I mean, that's just imagine next year when those guys play, when the Jeremy Garay, when Ronnie Arevalo, Steven Vasquez, just think forward when those guys play the U20 and they have all of that experience with the senior team. Just think of how beneficial that's going to be for our youth teams. We're changing something here. And it's hard to see sometimes, but when I saw all the criticism for the call-up that Hugo did for the game against Guatemala, that's when I think to myself, sometimes we as fans don't see that we are actually contributing to the same problem that we keep criticizing about the lack of opportunities to young players. Harold Osorio was another example I wanted to give. Harold Osorio was not really a consistent player for Alianza until Hugo Perez called him to the national team and said, hey, this guy has a future. Now he's playing for Alianza and scoring goals and doing really well. So, when we say tenemos que apostar en la juventud, and Hugo Perez is doing that, and people are saying, why are they calling an inexperienced team to play an international match? I mean, just sit with that and think about it for a minute. I think we're moving in the right direction. Of course, we want to qualify to 2022. We get excited about it, especially after what we saw in the Gold Cup
and against the U.S. Can't lie.
And against the U.S. I mean, but it's hard. But anyways, I just wanted to say that, and then about the coaching and salaries. That's another thing. I continually see so-and-so is making 30 grand and they don't do anything. And it's like, there's no coach coaching a senior team that makes any less than 15, 20 grand. That would be like the minimum per month. It's a position that pays a lot of money. And coaching a senior team is not like coaching a team. It's not like you can work every day and have camps every day and have, or even once a week. So I'm not defending De Los Cobos, but when people used to criticize the fact that he went on vacation when there was nothing going on, that's normal. Every coach in the world does that, but we criticize that and we want him fired. Just look at what's happening in Metapan. You fire the Spaniard, you bring Misael Alfaro as the solution, you give him 4 games, and then you let him go. And it's like, so what do we expect? We expect good results, but we continue doing those things that have over time proven not to
work at all,
yield any results. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. The games coming up are going to be tough, but I think that we're going to beat Panama. I'm positive that we have what it takes to beat them. The game against Costa Rica, I have similar feelings to you, that playing in an empty stadium can be beneficial for us, but at the same time, it requires a special mindset.
True.
To motivate yourself in an empty stadium. and that applies to both teams. And I think that's where, you know, the coaching staff has some work to do for that, whatever that may be. But yeah, I mean, I think all of us who have played any sport at any level, even amateur, even at our block, you know, if we just play a pickup game, we're going to feel differently if it's just our friends playing. But imagine if the neighborhood goes to watch the game and they're cheering you on, you're going to have a different sensation, right?
Yeah.
Or puteándote, whatever. It's different. So I think it would also require, you know, the proper mindset to be able to deal with the circumstances of playing the World Cup qualifier in an empty stadium. We play some of that in the, you know, prior rounds or with limited amount of fans, but I think it's strange. I think it's a strange position for athletes to be in, because the whole nature of being an athlete is to be able to have a large amount of fans, you know, cheering you
crowds,
on. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. And then the Mexico game, it's Mexico. I mean, it's I don't even know what to say about that. I think those are games that nobody wants to lose. The guys get excited about playing those matches. They want to show what they have. They want to earn an opportunity to play in the top league, to play in the Mexican league. Yeah, those games are interesting, but I think the focus should be beating Panama and I mean, we need to win at least 2 matches. But I think that we can get a positive result in Costa Rica as well. It's interesting. Panama is an interesting team. I admit I haven't seen them. Couldn't watch their last 3 games, but they struggle against Curacao. I mean, honestly, they went through by this much. Curacao did more to make it, and they failed to do it. But then I've heard, you know, they made a big shift since then. But the team I saw against Curacao to qualify to the octagonal, you know, that was not a team that I don't want to underestimate them, but I wouldn't hype them up in the way that their media is.
Yeah, and that's something I want to talk about too, is like, dude, don't buy into that, you know, because as with a lot of stuff on social media, it's clickbait and whatnot. They're just trying to rile people up. But I think the main thing that when it comes to Panama, and you have to respect, is that they've done something right, where, you know, they were bottom of the totem pole, basically, in terms of the region. And they've been able to turn things around little by little. You look at their squad and the number of players abroad, and it's very impressive. And considering that for the longest time, the Panamanian League was, you know, semi-pro or considered semi-pro, you know, in the hierarchy of Central American leagues. So, you know, if there's semi-pro, that said a lot, right? And now you're seeing those players being exported more and more, and even the domestic ones, there's a significant amount of them on their squad, and that says a lot about what they've been doing. Are they a powerhouse at home? I don't think so, but I think that's more of a cultural thing, right? Where soccer isn't necessarily the main sport there, but internally in-house, it looks like the federation's been doing a pretty good job, and you got to tip your cap to them. They figured something out, and I think you need to use them as a model in a sense of where El Salvador wants to go. They can definitely learn from them. But in the meantime, I wouldn't mind beating them at Cusca and then going into Roman and getting the 3 points there. So it'll be an interesting window. I'm pumped, but as you guys can probably see, I'm a little like hesitant, or like, you know, to like get too excited, obviously, because of where this team is in terms of the injuries, the table, the expectations. I'm not a part of the coaching staff, so I can't say that, you know, I expect to win every match. You know, I can step back a little bit, but I think, you know, 3 points at home against Panama is ideal. Anything less than that, things are going to start to look a little dicey in terms of the table. The trip to Costa Rica, I'd love a tie at least, if we were going to do the a la carte of the results. And then against Mexico, as we know, anything can happen at El Cusca. If this were at El Azteca, I'd be like, let's just not get too many injuries and not look too bad while taking the L. But at home, I think we can get that dub. Anything is possible. It just depends on who steps up. And I think that's the main thing with this second window. Players need to rise to the occasion. We saw them do it at the Gold Cup. We saw almost like this great connection between the coaching staff and the players, where they were able to make some changes depending on the situation, the match, and correcting certain things and looking good in the process of doing so. This last window of games, it seemed a little harder to react, to respond once, things started to develop on the pitch. But hopefully this time with the personnel, we know that we're going into these matches with, question marks in the center backs, but you got someone like Dominguez who, yes, his performances have been a little lackluster last couple of months, but this is his time to prove like, hey, I'm here. And hopefully he can take advantage of that. And then I think you're going to see the 5 drop a little bit more to help out the center backs, considering, that someone's going to be making their debut as a center back guaranteed, against Panama. So I think you'll see a little adjustments here and there with the 5 in their role, or if there's going to be 2 5s to help compensate depending on the situation. Because that's what I like about this coaching staff is the formation changed, the tactics changed in the match. And then you have players that can play multiple positions as well. So you'll see, rotations within the match. So in that sense, yes, I think this window will be exciting. But it's going to be a hard, bumpy road. We just need those points, man. We need to score some goals. But there's nothing more exciting than being able to look forward to, these 3 matches in a short amount of time. And I think I'll feel better once we get the ball rolling, get those points going. And then in the worst case scenario that it doesn't, I think the main thing that we need to realize is, they're rebuilding while being committed to this qualifying cycle. It's not like they threw the house out the window and they're like, you know what? Fuck Qatar. We're just going to work on player development and tweaking things here and there. And thank you for watching. Blah, blah. No, this coaching staff is taking a risk by, in a sense, calling Cristian Martinez, who's a little bit older, who's calling Pablo Puñet, who's a little bit older, and saying, you know what, we've noticed certain things in our certain mistakes that we want to correct. Here are some new pieces to try out. Like, there's this openness that I appreciate about this coaching staff to tweak things around. And that's very important because that's how you find the pieces, And so we'll see who rises up to the occasion. And I think that more than anything, that's what I'm excited to see is who's able to rise up, prove themselves, or prove that they're here for the long haul. And it'll be enjoyable. I think if at least for me, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm going to focus on is who are going to be those pleasant surprises. And then hopefully the team will be able to work out some of the kinks in defense and in the midfield. And then we'll start seeing all that being exploited up in the top third.
Vergón.
Va, cierra entonces.
Sí, pues ya hablamos bastante.
Va. ¿Lo querés hacer vos?
No, dale vos, porque yo hice el opening.
Va. All right, and there you have it, everybody. We're going to close up this episode. Thanks again for checking us out, being patient, and waiting for us to come up with this episode. We've been busy, like Hugo said. And we'll do our best to churning these episodes out, considering all the matches ahead in the next week and a half. And in case you don't have it memorized, I have the schedule up here on my screen, and it's looking like our match against Panama is on Thursday the 7th at 7:05 Pacific Standard Time, followed by the trip to Costa Rica. That will be on Sunday, October 10th at 3:05 Pacific Standard Time. And then La Selecta returns to Cusca to close out this window of matches on Wednesday, October 13th at 7:05 Pacific Standard Time. So yeah, hold your horses. It's going to be fun. I'm trying to stay calm and collected because sometimes getting a little too excited doesn't work to my advantage as a fan of La Selecta, and I'd rather not turn that into anything negative or talking bad about a certain player. Blah, blah. I don't really want to do that. You guys can find plenty of that in the comments of whatever social media people you guys follow and whatnot. But in any case, thanks again for checking us out. Enjoy these matches. Hopefully you can meet up family and friends. That Mexico El Salvador match, man, like, again, I feel for all you half Salvi, have Mexas out there. Must be an interesting time of the year to watch the game with your fam. If you guys hear this, anyone, please comment. How do you compromise that? How do you navigate that situation? Like, if you follow one team more than the other, do you avoid, like, let's say if you're a Selecta fan, do you avoid the Mexican side of the family for the day? Or the opposite, if you're a Mexican fan more than a Selecta fan, do you avoid watching it with your Trucha family? So let us know how you navigate that, because my kid will probably need some of those tips later on, because usually I dress her up in the blue. Anyway, thanks again, everybody. Please remember to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and just enjoy the moment, because, again, qualifiers don't come around that often. The last time we were in this, it was 13 years ago, and Cheo was king. So a lot has happened since then. Enjoy it, and we'll be back definitely soon to talk about the Panama match. So we'll see you guys later. Peace.